So today we're going to be talking about teaching yoga and whether you're going to choose that to be a full-time career or a side hustle or taking the path of teaching as a hobby. And however you do that, teaching yoga, I can attest, is the most rewarding of vocations. And it's a great business to run, and it's a very meaningful experience. But the path you choose, whether that's a full-time career or a side hustle on the side of a full-time job or full-time caring role, or a hobby that you cherish, each of those options holds a unique set of rewards and benefits and risks. So we're going to talk about that today. And we're going to talk about some of the practicalities so that you can make an informed decision about how you're going to develop your teaching practice and your yoga business potentially. And hopefully we'll have a few folks joining us today who have their own insights and experiences to share. So I hope we can have a really great dialogue. And I welcome you all to share your questions and your ideas and your experiences. But first, I'm going to do a little bit of an introduction into these three options of career and side hustle and hobby. And actually, I think I should preempt that to explain that I've been running my own business for almost 30 years. And I noticed that I tend to see the world through a business lens. And it's just like a habit coming from an entrepreneurial family and being an entrepreneur myself and, living in a capitalist society. But you might not look at your teaching practice the same way. And that's okay. We'll talk about non-capitalist options as well. And if I'm not touching enough on those options, let me know so we can dig deeper. I just wanted to let you know that I have a particular framework of the way that I look at things. And I want to make sure that everyone's ideas of how they're going to teach yoga are included. So first, we're going to talk about teaching yoga as a career. And this means that you spend most of your time focused on teaching yoga. Your income's largely derived from teaching. Generally, you're making a longer term investment in a business of your time and your energy and your resources. And that might be a teaching practice around various studios and gyms, or your own studio or gym. It might be teaching retreats or workshops or corporates or some combination of all of these. The benefits of having a full-time career are so many. It's incredibly fulfilling. A career allows you to immerse yourself in the practice and philosophy and study of yoga. It allows you to dedicate your time and energy to yoga and helping others experience those benefits and find meaning in the practice of yoga. As a career, as far as income potential, when you have the time and energy to focus on yoga full time, it can be easier to establish yourself as a yoga teacher, which can lead to a steadier income through classes, privates, workshops, retreats. Another benefit of yoga as a career is living a yoga-focused life. So when your only job is yoga, you get to be fully focused on yoga, which is awesome, obviously, and leads to a lot of creativity and skill development and a life built around yoga practice and philosophy and ethics and learning. And the fourth thing I want to say about yoga as a career is community building. When you're focused on yoga full time, it allows you to create a community of really dedicated students, which can be incredibly rewarding and allows you to build and maintain connections that go far beyond the yoga mat. As far as the risks of yoga as a full-time career, obviously there's financial risk. Without a steady paycheck, you'll be reliant on your yoga income, which can fluctuate and requires you to be adaptable and creative, and likely you'll need a lot of variety in your business. So teaching classes, teaching privates, workshops, online, retreats, corporates, and all of this requires a lot of consistent work. Another risk is burnout. So balancing the demands of full-time teaching and your personal practice can lead to burnout if it's not managed mindfully. That's something you'll have to put attention on. Admin, for those of you who don't love admin the way that I do, running a yoga business involves a lot of admin tasks. scheduling, client management, managing finances, and it takes time. And in many cases, it takes some training or some practice or some outside help. And then your entrepreneurial responsibility. So to run a successful full-time yoga teaching practice, you'll need to get comfortable with marketing yourself, seeking out new business actively and consistently. And that takes time and requires you to be developing and maintaining marketing skills in lots of different ways. So those are the risks of a full-time career, or some of the risks. Let's talk about the rewards. So one of the rewards is the impact you have on lives. So watching your students grow is one of the most profound rewards. And being immersed in a teaching practice allows you to touch a lot of lives, which is wonderful. One of the other rewards that I particularly love is flexibility. While teaching full-time can be demanding, you'll have agency and flexibility and control over your schedule, when and where you work, how you work. And to me, that's a real reward of teaching as a full-time career. Next, let's talk about teaching yoga as a side hustle. So what does side hustle mean? It means that you teach part-time, like a few classes a week outside of a full-time job or a full-time caring role. It means your income's not dependent on teaching. So you have some flexibility to choose classes at times and locations that work best for you and your lifestyle. And that might look like you're teaching in studios or gyms, or you're teaching a few private sessions, or you're teaching online, or maybe you're even teaching in your own workplace. And there's a lot of benefits to teaching yoga as a side hustle. There's less risk, there's less pressure. When you're not relying on yoga solely for financial stability, there's less pressure to develop and maintain a business. And often that means you can focus more on teaching and less on business and admin and being an entrepreneur. It's nice to have supplementary income. That's a benefit. So teaching yoga part-time is a really fulfilling way to earn some extra income while you're maintaining a primary career or primary caring role. Another benefit is happiness. So when you're teaching yoga alongside a regular full-time job, it gives you a place to be creative and to have agency and to share your love of yoga with others. And I'll say, especially for those who aren't super passionate about their full-time job, it gives you something to be passionate about. It gives you a light in your week to look forward to. So those are some of the benefits of teaching as a side hustle. Some of the risks, probably the biggest one is time management. Balancing teaching yoga part-time with your other job or responsibilities does require careful time management to avoid burnout. You'll find that your availability is going to be more limited if you're teaching as a side hustle. So that could potentially impact the growth of your teaching practice, the growth of your student community. But it's so rewarding. So teaching yoga as a side hustle allows you to share your passion without the full-time commitment and without the pressure, which for some potentially makes it a lot more sustainable and a lot more enjoyable. And another reward is being able to have community and interact with lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds and experiences, and being able to see yoga through other people's eyes is something that can really enrich your teaching and your learning and really broaden your perspective of yoga. So to me, that's one of the great rewards. Third, teaching yoga as a hobby. So what does this look like? It means that while you might be a registered yoga teacher and very professional in your teaching, you're not dependent on teaching or focused on your teaching as a profession. So you might volunteer, you might teach by donation, you might share yoga with just family and friends and neighbors, or you might sub classes when you're available or as opportunities arise or when you've got time. the benefits of teaching yoga as a hobby is obviously personal enjoyment. Teaching yoga as a hobby can help to ensure it remains joyful and focused on personal fulfillment rather than business. There's no financial pressure without relying on yoga for income. There's less pressure to fill classes or conform to trends or conform to what the market is looking for. But there are some risks to teaching yoga as a hobby. You'll have much more limited exposure without relying on yoga full-time or even as a part-time gig. You might find that you have fewer opportunities to share your knowledge and to share your passion for yoga, and less opportunity to connect with community, right? So that's something to think about. But the rewards, what are the rewards? Teaching yoga as a hobby, in a sense, for many, allows you to express your love for yoga free from business pressure, free from commercial pressure, which I know for some is really important. Um, and obviously, it's very flexible without the pressure to run a business or to teach for someone else and make commitments to weekly classes. You can really get curious and experiment with different styles, different teaching methods, different ways of teaching. And that gives you a chance as you develop as a teacher to find what resonates most with you and what resonates most with your students. So that's one of the rewards of teaching as a hobby. One of the reasons I think this is important to talk about is that I think people should go into their teaching practice being informed about what it takes to run a business and what kind of life it is. And as I mentioned, I come from an entrepreneurial family. I've had the privilege of seeing a life built on running your own business. And I've had a long time to get comfortable with living with an unreliable income. And I don't have kids. I don't have little people depending on me to put food on the table, just like the dog, but he doesn't think about me at all, or what pressure I'm under to buy his expensive food. But I think that not everyone wants to live a life like that, where there's instability in your income. And I think that that's something people should go into with their eyes wide open. Like, am I comfortable with that? Or do I need, for myself, for my family, for my circumstances, do I need that steady paycheck? And, someone putting into my super or retirement plan, and then I want to teach part-time. I think that that's a decision that does take some time to think about, because teaching yoga as a career, there's a lot of pressure. It is a lot of work. And as we've seen going through COVID, you have to be very adaptable in order to maintain a business. When things change, you have to be able to change with them, or your business can really suffer.
True.
One teaching path that I see regularly, and I think it's wonderful, is like the pre-retirement teaching plan, right? And it's like teaching yoga part-time or as a hobby during your main, what do they call it? Like your earning years, in your full-time career, you're teaching as a side hustle or as a hobby, and then transitioning into teaching more through your retirement. And I love this for a few reasons. First, rather than feeling like you're at the end of a career, you get this opportunity to dream and craft a new chapter of your life, right? Which is exciting. And it brings a lot of physical and mental health benefits for someone who's moving through retirement. And also, during your time when you're working full time and teaching on the side, you have that light in your life, something to look forward to each week, a meaningful and challenging and joyful role that you might not experience in your day job. Um, And the other thing that I love about the pre-retirement plan is it means that more middle-aged and older teachers will be sharing yoga. And that's great for all of us to benefit from their life experience and their wisdom, and to have a teacher who knows what it's like to practice in an older body with an older mind, right? People who know what it's like when you have to go oof when you get up off the ground, right? That's a value to the yoga community at large. So I love this pre-retirement plan that I see out in the world. And I think for those who have adjusted their lifestyle to having a full-time steady career, this is a really good option to look at. So sort of transitioning from hobby and side hustle into teaching full-time as you move from that full-time career into retirement or pre-retirement, right? When we think about what we're demonstrating in yoga, we're not just demonstrating poses or breathwork techniques on the mat. We're also demonstrating what does yoga look like in this kind of life, right? And and I think that it's really useful for the community to see more examples of what a yoga life and what a yoga practice looks like in an older body, or in, for someone who's going through menopause, or someone who's going through health challenges, or someone who lives with disability. I think that that's really useful. It's inspiring, which is great, but it's also like practically, these are the things that we do for this kind of body, right? And I know when I was, I started teaching when I was 22 years old. Did I understand a hot flash? No, I thought you got a little warm, right? I did not know it's a volcano in your body that can happen at any moment. And I had no understanding of that. So whilst I did my best at a young age to be a teacher for all the students who came to my class, yeah, I didn't fully understand what those unique challenges were. And now that I've grown into that phase of life, I think that I'm better at teaching to older folks coming to my class. I just noticed in my social media insights that my main demographic is 35 to 60-year-old women, and that suits me just fine, right? The next 22-year-old Heather type person who's coming up in the world of yoga is a great teacher for younger folks. I'm much more oriented to teaching older folks. So that's another thing about how you're carving out a yoga teaching practice for yourself, is understanding what demographics you want to address. And whilst we all want to make yoga accessible to everyone, we do have particular unique niche markets that we might focus on based on our learning, our experience, our perspective on yoga. And that's kind of cool. I think that that's a good thing to point out, that our practice might look different from our teaching. And also that when we're teaching, and especially when we're teaching full time, our practice might start to look different based on what our body mind needs after a full day or a full week of teaching the kind of yoga that we teach. So I found for myself, when I was teaching a lot of Ashtanga yoga, my practice became a lot more restorative, just to help me have balance, right? Because I was doing so much dynamic movement in teaching, I needed to have something a little bit more restorative in my own practice. Yeah, I hear that from a lot of folks who teach as a side hustle, who might really enjoy their job, but it gives you that extra thing in the week to look forward to, that gives you such personal fulfillment, that you derive so much meaning from, and it helps balance out the career path that you're on. And I spent a lot of time living in Canberra, where people describe their jobs as soul destroying, and wanted to teach yoga on the side. as something that lifted them up and where they could lift others up. And it was such a positive and enriching experience. But you do have to figure out, like, how many hours a week can I commit to this before the rest of my life starts kind of falling apart? And I think you mentioned, Tanya, also a really important point, that to get to know your rhythm as a person and as a teacher and work with that rhythm. And what I mean by that is, like, some of us can do really well teaching early morning classes and then heading off to work, right? And for some of us, that is so stressful that because it doesn't fit with your body's rhythms or your lifestyle rhythms. Some people can teach at night and that's what they love. And when you're first starting out as a teacher, you kind of might not know what that rhythm's going to look like. So I think it's a good idea to be kind of open and curious about how you might fit teaching yoga into your life. Is it going to be early morning classes, lunchtime classes, evening classes, weekend classes? Or do you not feel that that kind of weekly schedule is going to work for you and you want to teach pop-up classes? Or you want to teach, once a month, workshops, or a one-day retreat or something. And so I think it's great if you can keep your options open and keep your mind open to all the different ways you might teach. I know for people who are shift workers, it can be really difficult to commit to, like, every Tuesday night at 6 p.m. I'm going to teach a class. And so they might do things more like subbing or even sharing a class with another teacher. So they teach 1 week on, 1 week off. Or again, like pop-up classes or workshops or retreats. And so you can find a way to fit your yoga teaching practice into your life and to craft a weekly or monthly schedule that can work for you and your lifestyle and your career and your family. And you just have to be open to the possibilities and willing to be maybe a little bit creative about that. The way we teach yoga right now in Australia or in North America, it doesn't have to look like that. I just want to point out that we all go to the studio together at a certain time each week and we practice yoga. We know, having gone through COVID, that we can teach online. You've probably been to a studio where some students are in the room and some students are live streaming the class from home. There's different ways that we can do this. Maybe you've heard of classes that go on at the beach or at the park. Maybe you've been to pop-up classes yourself, or you've seen the rise in the not just weekend retreats, which are great, but like a one-day retreat or even a half-day retreat where you get to teach a little bit more of yoga, right? Not just teaching a yoga class, which on its own is amazing, but maybe offering something a little bit more in, teaching students, meditation or philosophy or breath work or doing arts and crafts or taking a walk in nature. So there's a whole host of opportunities out there for what your teaching practice might look like. And I think it's, I love being creative about that. Where it's a great idea to have some people who can cover your classes for you, right? Because invariably something's going to happen. You're going to fall ill, your car is going to break down, you're going to get flooded in somewhere. So it's great if you can develop some relationships with other teachers. If you're a solo entrepreneur, develop a relationship with some other teachers who you can sub for and they can sub for you, because it can be a heavy responsibility that every Sunday of your life you're teaching yoga. Some people love that. I did not. I did that for a number of years, and then I found that I wasn't in favor of it. It felt constricting to me. I much prefer projects. So, preparing for a workshop or a training and then running that training, and it's really intense and wonderful, and then wrapping up that training and creating the next thing. And that suited me a lot better than having to be somewhere every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Um, that just wasn't the rhythm that I loved, right? I do miss some elements of that, I'll admit. But for me, that rhythm wasn't really what I was looking for in my career. So just to point out that there's lots of ways that you can do this. And even when you're a sole trader or an entrepreneur, you don't have to be doing it alone, right? You can um, you can have associations with other teachers, other studios, um, so you can have backup and they can have backup, and so that you don't feel like you're out here doing this, on an island.
Mhm.
And that, and so I'll add that that's more work, right, to develop those relationships and to reach out to people, but it's a very rewarding work because you'll make great connections, you'll have some wonderful yoga teacher friends to rely on and who can rely on you. And I think that that's a really, if you're looking at having a long-term yoga career, I think that that might be an important element to have so that you've got that backup, right?
Yeah.
Mention is that I posted this topic of discussion onto a few of our social media groups in advance to let you know what's coming up and to also so get some ideas from people. And a, a few people answered, when I asked, do you teach yoga as a career, side hustle, or hobby? They said, none of those. It's a calling. And while I appreciate the sincerity of that answer, I mean, it's a calling for all of us, right? We're all teaching yoga because we love it. We've benefited from yoga. We derive great meaning in our lives through yoga, and we want to share that with others. But, like, practically, how will teaching yoga fit into your life? Can you manage the risk and unreliability of teaching full time for all the benefits that that brings? Can you fit teaching as a side gig into your full-time career or caring role, right? With all the benefits that that brings. Or are you focused on, you don't want to have business in yoga and you want to teach as a hobby to friends or families or as a volunteer? And I think that looking at the practicalities of teaching is important. As a career, do you have the time and the space and the risk tolerance for a full-time business with no other income or little other income? So it's a question to ask yourself. As a side hustle, can you carve out space in your week to teach given your existing work and family obligations, right? That's a question you should be asking yourself. Um, what are practical things to ask yourself about as a hobby? Do you still need insurance? Are you still going to maintain professional membership? Are you going to teach for free or by donation or sub classes here and there? Like, how will you maintain your teaching skills without a lot of practice if you're teaching as a hobby? So I think that these are good questions to be asking yourself, and know that however you craft your yoga teaching practice, it's not a fixed thing, that it might be something that fluctuates. You might start out subbing classes and teaching as a hobby and grow that into a full-time career, or you might look at teaching full-time now and then eventually transitioning into something part-time, right? To know that a yoga teaching practice is a fluid thing, and there's going to be things that you might plan for in your teaching practice, and there might be things that come up in your life where you have to adjust what you planned for. And I think that being aware of all the options that are out there and all the many ways that you might teach yoga is a good way to stay adaptable and to stay flexible, right? That I like that balance, from a practical perspective, to still have a steady paycheck coming in and money going into your super. Um, which I never thought was important until I got turned 50. But having money going into your super and working for you for your retirement, um, but having that little bit more space to do more learning, to reach out to communities that you can't necessarily reach when you're working 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, right? Like teaching to older adults, teaching in aged care facilities, teaching in community centers where those classes tend to be more during the week and during the day. So it'll give you that space to do that. I think that's an amazing plan. Yeah. A lot of work and it's consistent work. Like you'll promote and teach and work on your business and get to a place where this is just right. This is exactly how I want. I've got the number of classes a week I want. I'm earning the income that I need to earn. And then invariably something will happen and you'll need to build up another class or shift to another venue or and so it does require consistent work and it does require adaptability. And I highly recommend for those who are going to have a full-time career to have lots of variety in their teaching. So that might look like teaching group classes in the studio, teaching for a gym, teaching corporate classes like lunchtime or after work classes, teaching some online, doing some privates, maybe running, 1 or 2 workshops or retreats each year. That kind of variety is generally what it takes to fill up a full-time teaching practice, right? So you've got a variety of places that you're teaching, you've got a variety of income streams from classes, privates, etc. Some you're working for other people, some you're working for yourself. That tends to sort of, nothing can totally protect you from the fluctuations of the world, but it tends to protect you a little bit more from the general fluctuations that things go through. So you might be teaching in a space that does, in Australia, the 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off. If you do that with every class that you teach, you've got 2 weeks of free vacation time, but of no income. So you might want to have some classes in your week that aren't on the 10 weeks on, 2 weeks off schedule, because that can be a little bit daunting. And it's, things like over Christmas and summer holidays, your income can drop drastically. So having some things that can boost up your income to cover for those periods, and that might be workshops, retreats, corporates that pay that little bit of extra funds into your bank that can carry you through those lean times in the year. And all of that needs a little bit of planning and foresight, but a lot of it is you're going to work it out through practice and figure out wherever you live and whatever community you're serving, what is the rhythm of that and how can you work with that rhythm rather than fighting against that rhythm. Canada too, in the winter, like once you get home, you're not leaving the house again in the dark and the cold. Like that's not happening. So having a combination of face-to-face and live streamed classes can be a really useful way to keep people in their yoga practice during those winter times when people are wanting to head out at night for their yoga class, or teaching online classes. Some teachers are developing a library of online classes that their students can subscribe to, along with coming to some classes during the week. They also have a membership to an online library, so that's an option that can help carry you through those leaner times. One of the challenges, obviously, with online teaching these days is that there's a lot of saturation in that market, and there's a lot of big businesses that are offering huge yoga online libraries for very little money. And it can be really difficult as, me, yoga teacher in this town, to develop a clientele entirely online. So generally for the local yoga teacher, you're balancing out your face-to-face classes and online, and the majority of your online subscribers or online users are people who've had face-to-face contact with you,
That's true.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I see people nodding. Can I hear some insights on that, if you've got some experience with that? I mean, hopefully nothing like COVID ever happens again, but
Yeah.
like, especially when something big like that happens, you've got to be able to pivot, you've got to be
Mm-hmm.
adaptable. And it's so great to hear that you were able to maintain your yoga community through that. I started teaching yoga teacher training in Australia in 2006. And I had one of the earlier yoga teacher training schools, at least online, like having a website, having an online presence.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to imagine that now, given how much is online. And when you
Mm-hmm.
think about putting your classes and your teaching practice or your online classes or your library, or whatever, on the internet, there's a lot going on there. And when it comes to online, your students aren't just choosing between what local yoga class am I going to go to.
Mm-hmm.
They're choosing between what online class from everywhere in the world might I attend, or might I watch free YouTube videos, right? Might I pay $20 a month to have access to thousands of classes? And so being able to differentiate yourself in that market is getting a lot harder, right? Social media, we should do a whole other discussion on this, but social media marketing is not working like it used to.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll have to do some research for you, and for myself. I don't really know um, that it will ever return to what it was. The capacity we had to communicate and connect with people through social media in the past was amazing. It no longer is. So for those of you here, for those of you listening, and your social media isn't reaching people like it used to, you're not alone. This is what's
Mm-hmm.
happening to all of us. And even if you're boosting posts or placing ads, those aren't reaching people like they used to.
Yeah.
And so for me, one of the things I think is important, what differentiates you from the big global businesses that are offering online classes, is that you see your students, whether it's face to face or live streaming or online, like you're in a community and your teacher sees you and cares about you. You're not just a person on the screen, you're a person who um, is reachable by email or by a phone call, someone who can help with the questions you have about your practice, someone who can connect you to assistance as you need it. And so one of the things, especially if you're teaching online or live streaming, that differentiates you from big businesses that it's hard to compete with is that you're a small business. So make that a selling point or a selling feature of what you do, that you're a small business. For most of us as yoga teachers, we are one person, and we are one person who cares. We are one person who's reachable. We're one person who remembers you from the last time you logged into the class. We're one person who looks forward to years of practicing yoga together, not just posting a video up online and maybe someone watches it and maybe they don't. So that's a way to differentiate yourself in quite a saturated online yoga market, is to still, in whatever way you do, create a sense of community, connect people with community, and make sure that your students know that you are a teacher who cares, and you are their yoga teacher, right? Um, anyway, well, let's do a whole session on that, and I look forward to hearing everyone's insights and questions on that, because that's a complex space right now. It for every business, but the only business I care about is yoga. We'll talk about it through the lens of yoga. Um, but I do hear this from every business that I talk to and that I connect with, that it is getting harder to reach people through social media, just because it's so noisy out there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and yeah, so didn't balance that for a lot of years. I taught Ashtanga yoga, I practiced Ashtanga yoga. My body got really hurt. I started doing more restorative yoga, which was lovely. Um, but I also needed to like lift heavy things. And that was really important for me. So kind of it's for everyone to figure out um, what your movement rhythm would look like in a week and what works for you. So if you're teaching a lot of dynamic yoga and Pilates, you do want to maintain that in your practice to some extent, but maybe it doesn't have to be every day. Maybe some days you do something restorative. Maybe some days you go for a run or a bike or a swim. Maybe some days you lift heavy things, right? What works for your unique body and mind and practice? Some teachers do mostly meditation as their own personal practice, right? So it kind of depends. What are your goals? What are your values? What does your body need, right? That, yeah, if you stop looking forward to your practice, that's, that needs to be addressed.
Yeah.
Yeah. If you start sort of resisting the mat, you know, are you burnt out? Do you need some space? Do you need a walk? Do you need to meditate? Do you need to go to someone else's class so that they can hold space for your practice, right? Like you're holding space for other people's practice. So it's not necessarily a right wrong there. I think it's something that each teacher has to kind of figure out what the balance is for you and what you need. Yeah, that's a great question. We should do a whole discussion on that. Thank you very much for being here. For those of you who are here, hello to those of you who are listening to the recording. Um, and thanks for joining me to talk about, how you're going to craft your yoga teaching practice, whether that be a career, a side hustle, or a hobby, or something in between, or something that evolves and shifts and changes over time. Ultimately, this lies in aligning your teaching journey with your goals and values, the level of commitment that you want to make, and what you need for your you know lifestyle, your family needs, your health needs, etc. The practice itself is, an amazing thing to have in our lives, and then it's all about you choosing how you're going to share that. So thank you again for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you all next week. Thanks, Ta.